Joining us in the Informer studio, a long-time businessman, Victorian, Tony Domenico, is with Bertocchi Smallgoods these days, but you've been on the board of a number of businesses over the years. Welcome to the Informer.
Thanks, Georgie. Oh yes, a number of boards, a number of years.
Now you've done more than that. Take me back to those early days. What got you going in business? What was your why business for you? What did it mean for you? What was the decision behind those original ideas that this is your path and this is where you're going to go? Because you've been an administrator. What haven't you done?
I've been in politics. I've been a trade diplomat. I've been an industry organisation rep. I've been a company director. I've been many things. Mate.
So quite a CV.
Sorry?
So quite a CV.
Quite a CV. Yeah. Very interesting life. And I think the fact is that the ability to be able to do that and do so many things is the thing that makes me keen to make sure that other people can follow suit.
Now, with that in mind, I want you to talk about what's going to take to get Melbourne City. That is, not the football club that we love and care for, but the central business district of Melbourne, which has been for a number of years now the world's most livable city, but it's gone through a terrible disruption. So how do we get the city back up and vibrant? How aggressive do we have to be to get it going?
Pretty aggressive, I think. Vibrancy in the city means 24/7. 24/7 means clubs, bars, coffee shops, restaurants, hospitality industry. In other words, we need to have a look at the industrial relations scenario to make sure that if you order a plate of food at 7:30 at night, it shouldn't cost you more than if you order at 6:30, because the changeover period is 7 o'clock when penalty rates come in. It's those sorts of things that don't happen, as you know, in Europe and elsewhere, that we need to look at for Melbourne. Got to get people back into the city, obviously.
Is there a willingness, Tony, to make those adjustments, to make those, not corrections, but to make those deviations to allow that red tape, not so much to drop down, but to change what it's meant to do? We understand the safeguards. We understand what they've built up over the last 30, 40 years. They're safeguards for everyone, for the workers, for the employers and so on. But these are extraordinarily difficult times. How do we leapfrog and move forward?
Well, we've got to get people into jobs and to stay into jobs. Now, whether that be full-time, whether it be part-time, whether it be casual, there's a need for all those sorts of jobs to be created.
But public servants have been told to stay home.
Public servants have been told to stay home. They should be told to go back to work, to be very honest with you, because they're also the lifeline of the city. Nowhere else in the country are public servants not going to work in the numbers that they're not in Melbourne, so to speak. So, in other words, what I'm saying is, let's forget about ideology, political ideology. To me, if it makes good sense, it makes good politics, and I think the majority of the community will realise that and not be stuck down in either red tape or ideological politics.
There are some great ideas that have been floating around, and one that Sally Capp, the newly elected Lord Mayor of the city, was talking about. She touched on it. She would love to see the advent, the arrival of the piazza that is Italy's renowned and famous for, if we could generate and create some piazzas of substance in the city, and one that begs, in my mind, to come alive is if we could, from Grattan to Elgin, if we could close off Lygon Street once a month, maybe once every couple of months, and make it that weekend, that is Lygon Street Piazza. Could you imagine? Is that something that appeals to you?
No, during spring. Well, I mean, I'm smiling because about 12 months ago, as we speak, I actually shut down. When I say I am the chair of the Melbourne Italian Festa.
Oh, right.
We shut down Lygon Street, just like you've said. We had 50,000 people on a Sunday in Lygon Street for one day. So if we shut it 3 or 4 times a year, there's 200,000 people in Lygon Street, where all those businesses would continue to turn over. The tourism potential for Melbourne and Victoria and Australia, by the way, great idea. But let's not stop at Lygon Street. Let's have a look at the city. Look at Bourke Street Mall and how successful that's been. Let's see if we can do that in Kensington and North Melbourne and other areas. Footscray.
Well, Oakley's jumped the gun, has been doing it for quite some time. There's like little Athens.
Exactly.
In fact, I took my wife there a number of years ago, and she looked at me, she said, "How long has this been going on?
Yep.
And am I invited?" I said, no, you don't need a passport. Everyone's invited.
Well, up near your neck of the woods, Albert Park, that lovely area, Albert Park Shops.
Yes.
When I was there yesterday, all those beautiful restaurants, the greenery there, shut that down once every 2 or 3 or whatever it is, every 4 months. They're the sorts of things that we need to look at, and it's not rocket science. It happens in Europe and elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, it's a very good point that you make. I just saw another innovation that Port Phillip Council and some others are thinking about and have done, especially to help hospitality get back up and running, because Lord knows hospitality took a fearful hit, as did the events space. It disappeared for the last 8 months, and we need to get that moving. I've noticed that some of the restrictions, some of the red tape has been pulled to the side, and we're seeing parks now and hotels working in unison, pop-up cafe areas and restaurant areas. Suddenly, that once upon a time council were saying, no, we can't do it, don't want to do it, suddenly everyone wants to do it.
Domain Street in South Yarra, you can actually have lunch from one of the restaurants along the street in the park there, close to the botanical gardens, people in the sunshine, tables and chairs, having a good time. They're the sorts of things that can happen all over Melbourne, all over Victoria, because luckily we've got that ability to do it if those councils wake up a bit.
Can we get people to get away from this fear that they've had? Our government has been saying to them for a long, long time, you've got to be careful, you've got to socially distance, you've got to wash your hands, you've got to, all of those sorts of things. Suddenly we're saying to them, come. Is public transport going to be safe enough? Or is the messaging going to be strong enough and good enough to get people and bring them back? We're talking about the young kids, the parents, the grandparents, who so often these days have got grandkids on either side. We haven't seen those images for 7-8 months.
And we need to look at, and as I said, going beyond the square, let's have a look at the provision of public transport for free. Now, let's do the costings on that, because millions and millions and millions of dollars are used to sometimes subsidise public transport. What is it going to cost the government to make it free, or to make sure that the people that live furthest away from the city, for example, pay less? I mean, I live on St Kilda Road. It costs me about $2 to go into the city, but if I lived in Cranbourne, it'd be $7 or $8 or $9 or $10.
And that adds up.
And that adds up. So it's subsidising me in order not to, for the people that really need it. They're the sorts of issues that we need to talk about. Let's do that before we talk about building another 4 tunnels at a cost of $50 billion. Are people going to use those tunnels? We don't know. People have a fear now of public transport. Will that continue into the future? They're the sorts of issues that I think we ought to be talking about.
What sort of campaign should we be mounting to get the visitors from across the country to come to Melbourne again? Now, we still haven't heard about whether or not the Australian Tennis Open is going to be running. We have heard that the cricket should be on. The famous Boxing Day test looks like it's going to go ahead with limited numbers. Now, we may get a half-filled or a 2/3 filled MCG, which would be extraordinary and would almost take us back to almost the last major event that happened before the lockdown, and that was the Women's World Cup final, which saw Australia emerge victorious. It was a magnificent affair. What are the sort of campaign things and messaging that we need to apply to get the rest of Australia to say, come on down? We need the borders open, of course, but...
Well, we do, and I think we need a situation where, for example, the health professionals in Australia are all speaking with the one voice. Now, my view is, again, let's look at common sense. If you're the head health honcho in New South Wales and you're picked to do that job because you've got the qualifications, you'd think that the head honcho in South Australia and the one in Victoria have got the same or similar qualifications. So give me the health reasons why we can't have, for example, 60,000 people at the MCG for Boxing Day when we can have 50,000 people at the Gabba for the AFL Grand Final 2 months ago. So they're the sorts of issues that people should stop and think, because if it makes good health sense, it should make good politics. So let's get the politicians out of making the decisions. Because, as I said, and I'm not talking about Labor or Liberal politics, because no matter who you vote for, George, you'll always end up with a politician.
Correct.
Notwithstanding what political flavour they are.
This is true. This is true. Tony, do you have great faith that we can get Melbourne City up and running inside the next 6 months? All well and good.
I do, because I have great faith in Melburnians and Victorians who love this state and love this city, and people like you and I should continue to talk that up, because it is a great city, always has been, always will be, and I think we need to get the people back into the city to make sure that the city flourishes. Well done, Sally Cap. Happy to talk about those the festive things and the squares. I think it's a good idea.
Fantastic. Tony Domenico, thank you for joining us. Look forward to getting you back in the studio as we get into 2021. Tony Domenico, long-time businessman who's notched off and racked up quite some points on his CV, giving us a sense of just how Melbourne can do it, can get business back into the city, and can bring the people and the city alive if only we want to. So where there's a will, Tony believes there's a way.